Hey, Crystalline. So here's just a couple quick things I'm going to go through very quickly. It's like a crash course in some ceramics and to do things kind of simply. First of all, when you are making your ceramics, a couple things to remember. I'm sure you remember them maybe from school and things like that. Is that you don't want a solid piece of clay, big thick pieces, in the kiln. Just because I did this last year. I did pumpkins last year, and all the students wanted to know why I couldn't just roll up the clay into a ball, put a stem on it, and then put it in the kiln. Well, here's what I told them. If you have one big thick piece of clay in there and the middle of it doesn't dry out, when you get to over 1,000 degrees inside that kiln, it gets so hot that inside that wet clay in the middle will explode. So that's not good. So we have to make sure that it's hollow to make sure everything dries out nicely. Next, something that saved a lot of time for me that I did not realize that you could do is that after they made their ceramics, you could actually go on ahead and glaze them either that day or the next day if you really wanted to save on time and how many times you fire your kiln. So that saved me a ton of time, is going on ahead, and they would make their ceramics and then the next day they came in, which could be 2 weeks from then or the very next day when it's just dry enough, as I would let them go on ahead and glaze it then. And then it would take another couple days for it to dry. If you do not have that kind of time, you should have some programmable settings on your kiln, which will let you preheat your kiln to a certain degree. That way it'll really make sure that everything is all dried out before you get it to those really high temperatures. So for example, what I would do is I would set my preheat on my kiln to like 400 degrees just to make sure that everything's dry. So if you're crunched on time and you need to get these things in and out of there really quick, you can just preheat your oven to like 400, 500 degrees just to dry them out real good. Do that for like a couple hours. And then you can do like a slow fire, which is what I usually do. And I generally do a cone 6 on the programs, and I'll show you that in a minute. But that way, in case some kids didn't get completely dried out, it'll give it a lot more time for it to dry out so no cracks or explosions happen in the kiln. Okay, so now that you know a little bit about the clay stuff, which I'm sure you already did, but just in case, I like to make sure, so you don't make any of the same mistakes that I did. After that, let me see, you need the shelving all set up. So at the bottom of your kiln, you're going to make sure that nothing is touching the bottom of the kiln. You do have to have those tiny little cone stands, or these, I really don't know what they're called. Are they cone stands? No, these are just kind of like shelving rack things. But on each level, even on the very bottom of your kiln, you want to set them up down there. And you want to make this kind of triangular formation. So this is going to be your sturdiest way to do it. So you're going to have something in each corner here. Hopefully that looks pretty good for you. Then you can stack the next shelf on top. So you want to fake out your kiln to make sure it looks like it's pretty full. So even if you don't have something on every single shelf, maybe spread it out to where there is, or fill it up all the way to the top and put your shelves in there even if you only have a couple things to fire. That way the kiln thinks that it's full and you'll get a nice equal movement of air circulation all around there. Okay, so let's say that everything is ready to go. You got your whole kiln full, you're ready to start. So what you're going to do here is make sure your kiln is all closed. Alright, and you are locked up. And you're ready to move on. Okay, so the first thing you want to make sure to do is go on ahead and make sure everything is plugged in. You got that big old switch on your vent, so you need to turn that vent on first before you even turn anything on the kiln. Alright, so you got that in, your kiln is plugged in, you're ready to roll. Okay, now I have got everything plugged in, I've hit the stop button to make sure we can start a new thing. It is 71 degrees in there currently, and it's going to flash and probably tell you what temperature it is throughout the whole time. Please ignore all this paper stuff. For some reason I've put some storage back here. It's probably not a wise idea to put your paper products next to the kiln, but I leave it unplugged when I'm not using it, so it shouldn't hurt anything. But just in case, I do have my fire extinguisher close by. That way we don't start any fires or anything like that. I believe I mentioned checking your vent. Make sure the vent is on. You also want to make sure that no kids have accidentally or playfully put rocks or paper or anything inside your vent, That window right there goes out to our playground, and sometimes I find surprises out there. Not always a great idea, but it's good to always check. Okay, so here we are at 71 degrees and we're at idle. Okay, now you're at the next section. It should be saying idle and the temperature that's in there at the moment. And if you are ready to move on, you can go on ahead and hit cone fire, and it's going to ask you if you want it to preheat. So if you want to preheat it to like 450, you can go ahead and do that and hit enter. If not, and you're sure that everything is all dried out, you've let it sit out for a week and a half, it should be good, then go on ahead and just hit enter to skip it. It's going to ask you for a cone. I generally do like a cone 6 for the most part, just because a lot of the glazes want you to do a cone 6. If you're a little nervous it's too hot, you could always do a cone 5. It's kind of like your medium one, but a lot of glazes need a cone 6 for it to fire. So go ahead and hit your 6 if you want that. That's kind of general, so that's got to be my advice there. And then enter. And then it's going to ask you what speed. I usually do a slow speed unless I'm in a big rush. And then I might do a medium or fast speed, so it'll only take like 8 hours to do instead of like 12 hours. But if you're nervous that some of the students didn't dry out very much, or they're really thick, I would go on ahead and do the slow speed, so that way they don't get so hot that they just burst or just crack or break or anything like that. So if that's the speed you want, hit enter. Alright, so it's on hold, it's ready to go, so when you're ready from there, you're ready to hit on. Oh, no, we don't want it to hold, I'm sorry. Now that it says idle again, you're ready to start. Alright, and so that's starting up there. I don't want to actually make anything, so I'm going to hit stop. And you can always stop it anytime. Right, so here's my kiln schedule. If you need a kiln schedule, you're supposed to keep track of how many times you fire it. I think it's between like 50 and 100. You might need to purchase something new for the kiln. Unfortunately, I'm not a kiln expert or ceramics expert, so I'm just going to do it for a while and then double check with the manufacturer to see how many firings I should have before I need to purchase new equipment or new cones for my kiln. Alright, so I'm going to give you a close-up so you can look at my kiln schedule and see most of them. I used a cone 6. Let's see, another thing, you want to count out how many hours everything took, because I think it's so many hours that you fire that you need to keep track of, I believe. From there, also you want to make sure that you don't unload the kiln unless it's under like 200 degrees, and it's going to tell you that on the outside of the kiln. I usually set mine when I'm about to leave during the day because my room gets really super hot. If I do it during the day, unless I just want to get it all done, then I might start during the day. But I just let it go overnight, and I come back in the morning and see if it's ready for me to open up. Sometimes it's still not ready for me to open up until about lunchtime the next day. But make sure you give yourself plenty of time to unload it, organize where you want to put it. I've got a table here that I set their ceramics on, and I have it behind some cabinets. So that way I can kind of block off my area without any worries that the kids are going to accidentally get back there and play or accidentally break something when they're lined up.